Hello and welcome back to the MXGP Podcast Show on Vital MX. It has been a couple of weeks since we last graced you with our presence, but we're back to tackle all that has happened in the off-season thus far. We've had a new calendar, which is fairly final, although there will always be changes. We've had a couple of silly season announcements. There is normal paddock gossip to tackle, and so much more. As normal, there will be a fair amount of randomness, but I feel like that is the USP of this very podcast. So thank you once again for joining us, and thank you to Polosport, All Balls Racing and EVS Sports for their continued support of what we do here. You'll hear more from them a little later on. I'm your host, Lewis Phillips, joined by On Track Off Roads Paddock Pass Podcast, Adam Wheeler, Bookman.
Yeah, Bookman. I'm starting to feel like a boxer. How many kind of tags and intros do I need? Just the name will do.
To be honest, I'm surprised that my mind went to On Track Off Road. I don't know. That was a deep-seated memory that just came out of me.
Yeah, to be honest, it started in 2011 and only just stopped it this year. So it's been going a long old time, and it's quite dormant now. And let's see, what the sort of future holds. But yes, there are one or two projects potentially in the works for 2025 and beyond. But OTOR is somewhat sleeping at the moment.
I think it should come back.
Yeah.
And I think that you should really give it a good push. I think there's a space for it.
Yeah, but what do you do now with media these days? Because do you just throw up advertising and banners? I mean, that's already a fad that's passed off, right? Now it has to be about interactive or advertorial stuff, and it has to be maybe about a subscription model. People are paying for music, they're paying for streaming TV, they're streaming sports. I guess everyone's kind of hooked into some sort of media outlet as well. It's hard to know really how you present it and how do you sort of make money from it, how do you monetize it. That's kind of the rocky landscape at the moment.
Maybe I have so little faith in our sport, but I feel like in MotoGP, you can go to a subscription model and succeed. But I just feel as though the moto community, there's 2% of people that would be willing to pay anything for any content.
It does work in some places, though. I mean, Lebig,
True.
He's made a living out of. I know he's catering for a very specific sort of French market, but it's within Supercross where there's a great sort of heritage. He's found a nice spot in the market. That's all you need to do, really.
Well, I feel like we have a spot in the market because ultimately no one is doing MXGP. It's like this quiet, hidden, back of the cupboard, dust on it item. So maybe answer this, people. If we charged, which we're not going to, but just for general research purposes, if we charged €2 a month, a ridiculously low amount, how many of you would stop listening? I would bet over 75%.
It's going to be hard to say, isn't it?
Maybe I should give us more credit and drum up that people wouldn't be able to live without this. Of course, they would all spare €2 for us.
Who knows? But the thing is, Lewis, I get the feeling on these MXGP podcasts you can, open your mind a little bit. I mean, am I incorrect in saying that when you're doing like LVK and other sort of podcasts in the US, you find yourself having to explain MXGP a little bit more, or you find yourself being badgered a little bit by sort of very opinionated sources that don't necessarily know that much about the series?
Yes. This is therapeutic for me. This is honestly, I don't even, as people may have noticed, when we're doing this podcast, I almost forget we're doing a podcast, which is different to my other ones. But genuinely, I look forward to this because it's a relief. It's almost relaxation. Like it really I had a spring in my step this morning because I knew this was coming after a heavy drought, which you were to blame for because of your international travels.
Well, hey, listen, my season's still going. I mean, the 20th MotoGP Grand Prix has to happen next week. Thankfully in Barcelona, well, in somewhat tragic circumstances, of course, as people who are engaged in the motorsport community might have seen, or just generally, the city of Valencia was victim to some catastrophic flooding, and that ultimately cancelled the final round of MotoGP that traditionally takes place there at a circuit just outside the city. And Dorna Sports, the promoters, have reorganized the final round to take place in Barcelona, which is good news because it's my home round. There's nothing like working at a motorsport event and sleeping in your own bed. But of course, there is a slightly somber feeling around this final round, and the championship still has to be decided. So looking at the sporting aspect, it's going to be kind of interesting. And also, because we're deep into the fall over here, touching the winter, so the conditions could be a bit sketchy, whether it's going to be rainy or whether it's going to be very temperate, so it's going to be hard for the tires to get warm. There's quite a few lottery aspects to this last Grand Prix of the year, but then hopefully it will all be over, and then we'll be into the off season. The only big shame, of course, of the Barcelona MotoGP happening is that it coincides with Paris Supercross, which I kind of, wanted to visit again. It's been a couple of years now. Are you going?
No.
No? Why? Money?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sad. I'm hoping that somehow, some way I make it there, but I'm honestly, I'm gutted, and this will surprise you. I'm really sad that I'm not at EICMA this week.
Yeah, but then you get there and then you realise it's just a big clusterfuck, really, and everyone's too busy, and everyone kind of looks at you and talks to you, but they don't really, the lights are on, put it that way.
That's true.
Yeah.
But
EICMA's okay, you quickly get knackered and tired.
Circling back to MotoGP, it's a good time to interject with a question from Cody Seiler, who said, for Adam, with Ducati losing the Pramac MotoGP team, will any of the staff go over to the MXGP team?
No, because the Pramac team is a satellite team, and there might be one or two technicians that are contracted to Borgo Panigale, where Ducati are based. But the rest of the staff will just transition into Yamaha uniforms. And their first outing on blue bikes will be at the official test, which is 2 days after the final race in Barcelona. So you won't see any kind of cast-offs go into the MXGP setup. And as we know, Lewis, the MXGP team is going to be run by Corrado and what's his name? Marco, sorry, his son, Madi. So they're going to have their own staff in place, of course, with some of Ducati Corse off-road's own technicians and engineers. I don't think there'll be too many shavings from the independent Pramac team for MXGP.
Honestly, the most interesting acquisition that I've heard Ducati make, and the name escapes me, as well as the former position, so this will absolutely mean nothing. But Jeremy told me that they acquired someone who was essentially head tech man at Yamaha, who Jeremy was very excited was coming to Ducati. Jeremy was like, this is it. Like, we're off to the races with this guy.
But in MotoGP, it's the other way around. Everyone's trying to poach Ducati staff. There's 8 Ducati bikes on the MotoGP grid, and the reason they're dominating that series is because they have that big net of data, and also they are able to customize their electronics, at least for the GP24 version of the bikes, to best suit the Michelin tires, and everyone else has been struggling with that this year. So whoever's in the electronic department at Ducati Corse deserves a big pat on the back, because they've essentially made MotoGP red this year, and I guess they're going to need to do some work in motocross, because that's going to be a pretty complicated machine to get ready.
Yes, indeed. Let's jump to the MXGP calendar. We'll have more on Ducati later because we've got quite a lot of Jeremy Seewer questions, all of which can be answered in one foul swoop. MXGP calendar. This is your MXGP podcast where you get expert opinions, correct pronunciations, and all of that good stuff, just to clarify, so you can trust our input. It surprised me, I will say that to start, and every person who I spoke to who works for a team said, this is not what we want, this is terrible. I did not hear a good review of the calendar from anyone. I don't know what exactly was so detrimental to their opinion, because honestly, we knew Australia was coming. The Turkey, China, Australia triple header was long rumoured. But yeah, no one was particularly stoked. So what jumps out to you from the calendar upon first glance?
The opener. I mean, the fact that there's going to be a Grand Prix of Argentina, but not in Nelkian, is big news. I don't really know much about Argentine motocross. If there's a track in Cordoba, if it's any good, if it has to be a new build. After the way I think MXGP finished at a slightly sort of contentious track in Kozar, which incidentally is going to be round 2 in 2025. That's also surprising that it's there. Then, I wonder how the teams will feel about going to a place that might not be bedded in, might not be any good, it's untested, unproven, that kind of thing. I do kind of subscribe a little bit to the belief that MXGP should launch a sort of signature, a strong track, a stronghold of motocross and motorsport. Nelkian had become that, and it was a track that was extremely fast, sketchy in many ways. Of course, we saw 2 massive injuries at the beginning of 2024 there. But then again, Lewis very well that the atmosphere can be electric there. It really was an exciting place to start, and usually the climate was much more generous than it would be in Europe at the beginning of March. I guess that's going to be the big kind of eye-opener, really.
I'm going to call it Villa La Angostura because I cannot pronounce Neuquén correctly. So to avoid ridicule, I'm going to go for Villa La Angostura. I didn't feel as connected to it as you. Like, I didn't look at it as like, this is now obviously an incredible track, incredible backdrop, ticked all of the boxes. As far as a flyaway goes, incredible. But I never felt like this is now motocross, what a signature start to the season. So I'm open-minded to Argentina as a whole and thinking that they can just replicate that elsewhere. I mean, if anything, this is closer to Buenos Aires, which means that it should be busier, more electric, more popular, more successful.
Yeah, I mean, as we said before, for example, from the UK, it was the 13, 14-hour flight to Buenos Aires, then it was another 2-hour flight. Once you've gotten across the capital city to Bariloche, then maybe an hour and a half drive to Neuquén or Villa de Angostura. It was a real hike. I mean, it was an amazing place, amazing setting. And I think for reasons I said, it's a fantastic atmosphere. It was a worthy Grand Prix. Cordoba is slightly easier to get to, but then what is there? And I think also there's something slightly special about racing in South America. My experiences with the Brazilian Grand Prix as well were always that they were packed and passionate events. And, I think it's a decent place to start the World Championship, but this Cordoba venue is a mystery. Can
we once again acknowledge the fact that Brazil, heavily rumoured, did not come to fruition? We're now on a 10-year streak of, Brazil's on this calendar. I've seen it. I've seen the calendar. Brazil's on it. Yeah, we're going to Brazil. We're going. And then nothing. Like, that is like an old wife's tale at this point. I don't know if Brazil's ever coming back, despite these constant rumours.
Brazil always relied on really good funding from the local principal areas where it was, organised. I mean, the fact they were able to build a track inside the grounds of a popular theme park, it just showed the kind of investment that was there, and it had heavy backing as well from the industry. It was always like a heavy presence from Honda. It just must be the economics and the mechanics of trying to get a Grand Prix over there, Lewis. But you'd think it would be an amazing sort of double-header to do, Argentina and Brazil. There's still a couple of gaps in the calendar, though. So in theory, it could suddenly surface. But I think overall, in general, there are a couple of surprises in the 2025 calendar. And one of those being that Kozar and there's 2 Spanish Grand Prix still there after 3 in 2024. Jorge Prado is not going to be around, so let's see how the audience attendance and the general admission becomes a factor in there, and for the stability of the Spanish Grand Prix moving forward.
Well, that's one of my standout points. So this, in a way, encapsulates Infront's ability to just... You're so close. You're just almost there, and you just fall at the final hurdle. This year we had 3 Spanish tracks. Lugo, which was amazing. I think everyone was very happy with that. Into Xanadu, which, although it's not loved, I think that we've all reached a point where we are okay with it. Correct? Like, I think we're accepting Into Xanadu. And then Kozar, which essentially was the most hated MXGP track in some time. And of the three, the one that makes it onto the first edition of the calendar is Kozar. And it's like, come on, like, you were so close. Like, you were so close. And there is another Spanish TBA, so I would presume that will be either Lugo or Into Xanadu. But the fact that just Kozar is on the calendar waving the Spanish flag, it's just like, you're not, again, I think I've said this before, you're not doing yourself any favours. Like, so close.
There must be a press release about it somewhere, but they must have signed a 2 to 3 year deal. And it's like the Japanese Grand Prix, where the first year we went there in 2005, pretty big attendance. The event was a success. We found out afterwards that, the organizers, I think Yamaha had put a lot of money into it, and the Sugo circuit weren't overly impressed by it. And then the 2 following editions, the crowd sort of dropped off a little bit. Whether that's down to promotion or whatever, I don't know. But the Japanese still fulfilled their contractual obligation in running those 3 events, even though you could see that the event was probably running at a loss by the third and final incarnation. So it's maybe Kozar is just one of those things where they had an allotment of funding, managed to do the deal, and then they have to sort of see it through. But it's curious that they've slotted into round 2. And, probably the better date, considering how hot things can get down in sort of southern central Spain.
Reverting back to the Sugo point, obviously I never went there. I was 10 at that point in time.
Rub it in.
But watching it on TV, Sugo always seemed electric to me, and like it seemed like a real
amazing track,
momentous part of the calendar. But you're saying that actually in person, everyone was kind of like, yeah, we're just riding this contract out. This has no legs. This is a lost cause.
No, that was the vibe from the organisers and the promoters' side.
Oh, okay.
And you could see like the paddock kind of diminished a little bit every year. There was less fanfare, less attendance. It felt like it was downsizing each time. I think the paddock generally enjoyed going there. I mean, it was a really cool track. And, the weather was typically Japanese and it could be very miserable. But people like staying at Sendai. There was a real kind of community feeling inside the MXGP Championship and paddock. And, there was even like a whip round to, get hospitality in between the teams, all organized, because Sugo's in the middle of nowhere and there was no kind of decent amenities. So yeah, it was the Japanese GP just bizarre, and of course Billy Mackenzie's sort of phenomenal record at that event, 2 wins in MX2 and then also winning the MXGP in the 3rd edition, and he was the first British rider to win in the Premier class in sort of the 4-stroke era at that time,
and sadly one of the most recent.
Yeah.
Because
Sean Simpson won.
It's only been Sean Simpson since, hasn't it? Because Tommy never won, Max never won, Ben hasn't won yet. Watch this space. That's actually quite a sobering point. Billy Mackenzie is still like the 4th most recent victory that Britain's had in the Premier class. Back to the calendar. The other thing that surprised me is we are missing Majora, Agueda, Matterley. Like, we're missing some incredible tracks, stalwarts of the calendar, superb venues, events that arguably should never be questioned. Really surprised that we're missing all of those.
Yeah, but Matterley's in that position now, isn't it, where it's kind of like a first backup? I guess it just can't... It must be a hard exercise for sort of Steve Dixon, the organisers, and Infront Moto Racing to make any money from it.
Would you agree with me that the TBA on the 4th of May, being the week before Spain, logistically, it would make a lot of sense that's going to be Agueda?
Yes. I mean, the teams have to get from Switzerland right over to the other side of, the western side of Europe. So it's not going to be easy. I mean, that is a pretty big track.
There's a week off, though, between.
Yeah, I guess. I haven't seen when Easter weekend is as well, for 2025. But if it's late or early. But yeah, the TBA is interesting. That's the one big gap, isn't it, in the calendar? I kind of figured it would be Majora, but...
Oh, really? I guess that also would work, but I just felt like that would be Agueda because that's typically where Agueda has sat on the calendar as well. And I wouldn't think it's going to be Matterley, because Steve Dixon has gone on record as saying running an event in spring, summertime just isn't financially viable with the cost of fencing, security, staff, etc., because of festivals coming up.
But 4th of May is still quite early. I mean, that could be doable. But then it is a stretch for the teams to go from Switzerland all the way up to the UK, then all the way down to Spain. And if it is going to be Madrid or it's going to be Lugo, that is quite a trek around Europe for the paddock. I'll tell you one thing. I agree. There's some big names missing. I wouldn't be surprised if Matterley didn't make it, just because it's been hanging on that thread for the last few years. But I mean, just looking at it, I'm looking at it right now, and the first thing that sort of leaps out to me is how kind of globe-trotting and expensive September's going to be. Because the beginning of September, you're going back to Turkey, or Turkey, or wherever you want to say it. I'm amazed that's still on the calendar, Lewis. Well, I have no idea how that event sustains itself.
I'm amazed that I've been beating the drum calling it Turkey, thinking I'm the most cultured person in the room, and actually it's pronounced Turkiya. So I've been miles off. That was embarrassing.
You said at the head of this segment that people will come here to learn pronunciation. We're just muddying the waters. But then straight after that, you've got 1 week to get to China again. So the same sort of bounce that the teams did this year. And then they have to hang over and go straight down to Australia. You might get back and then get a week off just to sort out your jet lag before flying to Indianapolis if you're doing the Nations. So that is a hit to the wallet in September. And one way it's really cool because it is a world championship. I mean, Turkey, China, Australia, then to the US for the Nations. It's a dreamy situation if the health of the sport and the paddock is ripe. But then, I do fear we might be seeing diminished gates at those races.
I tweeted this, but across September and the first weekend of October, MXGP riders who do the Nations will do 26,910 miles in a month.
You've had too much time on your hands these weeks.
I thought that's quite a cool stat. I mean, I don't actually have context for how far that is or whether that's actually a lot or not. Like, I presume that's actually fairly normal for MotoGP.
Yes. I mean, MotoGP's just done 6 rounds in 7 weeks, which included Indonesia, Australia, Thailand, Japan, Malaysia. Am I missing one? Probably. And Misano. I was in Thailand because that's also going to be the source of or the host of round 1 next year, as well as a very kind of unique championship launch event, which is going to happen in Bangkok. And I do wonder if other sports might take this up, because it doesn't seem like a bad idea of just getting everybody and all the protagonists and significant team members and motorcycles together and doing one big kind of 6-7 hour event showing everybody off and their new colours and everything like that.
Well, I feel like Super Motocross could do that because they have a media event on the first weekend of December, roughly each year, where all of the riders have to go to Angel Stadium for TV material, a load of different stations regarding TV coverage and stuff like that. You could quite easily shift that into a spectacle, but then the problem is with this sport is there's not really much legit media, so what would you really get out of it besides seeing the same 4 faces?
There was some talk recently in the last couple of years, pre-pandemic, in MXGP about doing like a GP0, like an official test where all the riders could get together and just like lap one track. And that would also be an opportunity for the promoters to get their video content, get all their kind of visual material recorded. It was like a kill 2 birds with 1 stone kind of thing. Riders could do like time sessions against each other. There was talk about that, and I always thought it was a pretty good idea because, again, it's something MotoGP do with their official they have 2 official preseason tests. Of course, it's a matter of homologation as well and signing off on fairing shapes and engines, as well as sort of closing the technical package for the season. But I always thought it'd be cool for in MXGP because you could charge fans a sort of nominal fee to come and see the riders for the first time in the year. You could do it at a venue that maybe is very cool but doesn't have the financing to run a proper round of the World Championship, such as like Red Sand. I always thought it was a scheme that had some merit.
Yep, and if I dig into Lewis's treasure chest of previous gripes, they could also do the opening press conference for MXGP at a nearby hotel in a conference room rather than having 10 riders sat behind a table that only accommodates 5 and having riders sat on just a chair in a tent, because that's always laughable. And they could just put them in a conference room of a nearby hotel and it would all look much nicer. Zero cost, apart from renting a conference room for an hour, which is, what, €100? I'll do that for them. Happy days. Yeah, so just if I pull that rant out, that can go alongside that.
Well, people think, what are you moaning about? This is just minor things. But any possible chance to increase promotion of MXGP or motocross has to be considered and should be considered seriously. I think you have to try to modernize the sport a little bit because it's in a very uncomfortable and stodgy TV package. You can make as many sort of highlights programs and behind the scenes clips as you want, but to have live coverage of motocross is extremely difficult in this day and age. And I think, MXGP deserves plaudits, as we've been saying throughout the podcast in this year, for embracing stuff like drones and trying to change things up a little bit. But I do feel that the TV presentation of sport needs a bit of an overhaul. And now is the time to sort of look at different ideas and look at what other sports are doing.
Kevin C430 said, can you give us the latest on the TBD rounds in MXGP? We did that. There was another calendar question, which I'm just going to pull up now quickly. Jens Danker said, give me 2 or 3 old GP tracks to go back to the schedule. Is Sugo on your list, or is that not quite podium territory?
No, for the quality of the track, yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Well, the question was track, so...
Yeah, for sure. Track we haven't seen for a while.
Isle of Wight.
Yes, 100%. Gore Basin. It was a hit. I don't even know if it still exists.
No, it doesn't. It's it's some sort of manufacturing plant now, I think.
Oh, really? It's been built on because next door to it was like the most haunted inn or house in the UK or something.
What? Is that official?
Yeah, it was just down the road. So I don't know.
Yeah,
the ghosts.
If you're American or you're only just started following MXGP, go on YouTube and try. I presume there's something. Try to find 2005 Isle of Wight MXGP highlights. The track will amaze you. Everyone talks about how amazing American tracks are. I would argue that track could rival any track in the world for a professional race. Incredible.
Yeah, props forever for Johnny Douglas Hamilton for creating it. Along with Jeff Perry, of course, and his feedback. But it was a European track built to be like a national track. And that's why it worked. The riders loved it. And when riders love a track, then you're just going to see them go flat out and you're going to see all kinds of racing. So 2 Grand Prix there, 2004, 2005.
Yeah, that was it, wasn't it? They definitely didn't do 2006.
Yeah, Matchams Park. I mean, that was not a bad effort, but just problematic from the get-go.
Was it?
Just really, really bizarre circuit. Just a complete 2 different halves. One sort of in the valley and with this kind of like shale wood chip surface that was very soft, and then you had like another section which was sort of up on the Esplanade, kind of like Namur, which I would want back on the calendar just for nostalgia, but as a track, it sucked balls. It was just impossible to pass. If you had the whole shot, then you had a good chance of the podium. The event itself, very special. At least have it once every 2 years. It can't happen, of course, now because it's like it's a park. It's on a citadel. It's on a fortress inside a city centre. So trying to organise a motorsport event is obviously logistically very difficult. And the late great Eric Bors was the main force behind it. And he saw how difficult it was after a number of years and transferred his energies to Lommel instead, that had a lot more backing from the local government.
Matchams has been appearing on my Facebook feed this week with just random highlights, and it, like, seeing it again is very you forget how good it was. Is it possible? Like, remember, Isle of Wight did 2 events. Is it possible that Matchams was the most successful one-hit wonder? I can't think of another one track that appeared for 1 year only, but is still referenced and celebrated a little bit. Yeah,
especially by Carl Nunn's family. What a ride that was. But It was slightly dysfunctional, wasn't it? It was an ambitious project that ultimately didn't work because it didn't come back again. Other tracks, I did like the Motocross of Nations track at Franciacorta. Fantastic race between Tony Cairoli and Chad Reed. Of course, the Americans won with their B team.
This will make you chuckle. I won tickets to Franciacorta from Alex Hodgkinson. Of all the people, what are the chances? Wow. This will also make you laugh. In COVID, when we had absolutely zero races to cover, I dedicated an entire 2 days of coverage to the 15th anniversary of the Matchams GP, and I interviewed I interviewed like a lot of riders about their race and what they remember, and
wow, big attachment.
In one way that seems ridiculous, but in one way I admire the fact that I used to be quite savvy with thinking about angles and different ideas.
Yeah.
But also ridiculous.
Yeah, as much as Matterley Basin and Steve Dixon deserves endless credit for making that the consistent home of British motocross when nobody else really gave a fuck. I would like to see the British Grand Prix at somewhere else. Just try somewhere else. It could be a disaster, but give it a go. Give the riders, the teams, the fans something different. And as we've seen with Hawkstone Park, which we've talked about on this podcast, Lewis, just being completely inappropriate for large international meetings. But you can see the way that the crowds and the fans respond to that location. If you had sort of like something similar in the Midlands or the north of England, then it would be quite special, I think.
Talavera de la Reina, that's on I only went there once, I want to say, maybe twice.
No, too narrow. Again, it's just hard to pass, hard packed, dusty. Again, it's one for sort of the history books. In the small chance that Gordon Crockett's listen to this. Sorry, Gordy, because I know you liked it and you got special memories there. But it's not a favourite of mine.
So, moving on.
Okay.
You can veto this if you like. We've had a lot of questions about MXGP prize money and does MXGP need to change? Partly in response to recent comments, partly in response to Prado, Coenens, Kai potentially leaving for America. Do you want to get into this again?
Yeah, I mean, we've done it a little bit. I did. It was Gypsy Tales, wasn't it? Like Jason McAlpine. I don't know him, so I don't want to judge him. I don't listen to that many podcasts. I don't really listen to that one, purely because it's an interview format that's very long, and I get where he's coming from because he tries to generate a bit of a conversation with his subject, and it can be engaging. Sometimes I've sort of listened to stretches of the podcast of one or two guests because he gets some good guests on there, but I found it quite odd, this sort of social media clip that sort of popped up this week where they're criticizing the fact that MXGP riders earn zero money because that's a bit late to the party, mate. I mean, that's been, 10, 15 years like that. And the sad fact is that MXGP has a structure where they just provide like a plinth or like a demonstration case for brands and sponsors and talent to go racing in the knowledge that you're going against the best machinery and the best riders. That's it. And of course, you pay a fee for that rather than them paying you to do it. I mean, it is quite fucked up, and it is, it kind of takes away something of the old spirit of motocross, but that's just the way it is. I don't think you can criticize something that's been that way for quite a while and people willingly accept to do. It's a bit like sort of raging against a political machine that's going on. I don't think it's really going to change.
Yeah, and I have long been of the stance that even if Prado was paid adequately for his championships in the form of prize money, he's still going to chase the dream of Supercross because these riders are not moving to America for money. Money is certainly never the priority. It's always to fulfill the dream of Supercross. So the notion that, they left because they're going to be paid more, completely wrong. And I can speak for, I feel, every single rider who's moved to America in that case. It is purely the fact that they are satisfying an itch of Supercross that cannot be done in Europe. That's it.
Also, in the case of Prado, and certainly people like Tom Vial, they've been racing on tracks in Europe since their sort of early teens. And, you do something for 10 years since you're 13, 14 years old. You just want to change. You want to do something different. You want to try different tracks, different series, different challenges. And that's also got to come into it. But when you're at the level of the athletes that other media are talking about, like the Coenens, like Kaido Wolf, world champion, Jorge Prado, world champion, you're right, Lewis. I mean, I don't think financial rewards really come into it all that much because, they know they can make a packet just by staying in Europe as well. So, that's not really the thing. It's just it's the difference. It's the challenge of it.
I feel like a nice middle ground for Infront would be that they don't pay prize money per race, so they keep to that model, but there is some sort of championship prize fund for the top 10 only. So it's almost a gesture. You're still not giving everyone money, and maybe it's not the biggest purse, but it is a gesture that maybe would shut some people up. I don't know. But then
it all depends on margins, doesn't it? I mean, how much profit margin is Infront Moto Racing making from the sport? And, how much can they invest back into it to make it even bigger? And then how much could you also reward or kind of stabilize the paddock by giving some of it back? I just think that the margins are there. Of course they are. And anybody that comes in to organize a professional sport is going to do it to make money. They're not going to do it because they're passionate fans or whatever. It's a business. So, wishing Infront Motor Racing had disappeared the next day and someone else comes in, you're going to get the same scenario. In fact, it might even be more extreme because that new company is going to have to, justify huge investments straight off. Whereas at least Infront have an established crew, an established system and protocol in place, established contacts and suppliers. So, it just really depends on how much money needs to be made or justified and how much can be invested back in. And the sad truth is that, there hasn't been that much reinvestment since the beginning of the century.
What's your reaction to this sort of narrative? For instance, we've got a question from Stevens Free that says, yes, I've got a question. The situation with MXGP now, is this the narrative forever? Credibility down the poo emoji. So the toilet, presumably. A question from Porks13. How long is MXGP going to last? Does MXGP need to change drastically? Point being, question from 182.6797023. Maybe that's his phone number. Will MXGP die in the next 10 years? Point being,
cheery questions.
This is for whatever reason, this is the vibe that MXGP and Infront are getting off, and I can't understand where that's coming from, but it's clearly consistent enough where it needs to be addressed in some sort of way. I don't have the answer for that, but it almost puzzles me that that's the attitude, or that that's the perspective of MXGP.
Also, since 2021, I don't think there could be that many complaints about the racing or the championship narratives. I mean, we've been spoiled, I think, with the closeness of the competition. If you break it down to its basic elements, Lewis, what is it? It's an FIM World Championship. And that stamp already justifies interest and involvement from the manufacturers, which pay for a lot of it to happen. Then you look at the other aspects of the series. It runs prototype machinery. It can be a testing ground for other sorts of technology, which also filters into other projects, made by those manufacturers, whether it's snowmobile engines or whatever else. KTM even used some of the information from their KTM 250 SXF to go Moto3 racing. So there is kind of like offshoots from what people are doing inside motocross. And of course, we know there's a massive kind of aftermarket and accessories, industry for moto. And that also needs a place to go through tests, trials, and to have promotion and to have visibility. So MXGP is going to survive in that sense. And from a sporting aspect, it's the biggest platform you can have. You might not earn anything. In fact, you might even have to pay to get into a gate next to Jeffrey Hurlings if you're a pretty decent championship, like a national championship runner. But at least that opportunity exists, and then you can try to get better as an athlete. You can try to attract more sponsorship, try to make yourself more marketable. That's the way that sport's drifted in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, and
I don't know what you think being in the US about MXGP and how your sort of perspectives changed on it in the last couple of years.
My perspective, honestly, I think my respect for MXGP has gone up. If in some elements, like it's good. Like it's almost shone a light on the elements that they do well. They do really well. But I think that one of the grey areas is in F1 there are 10 teams. In MotoGP there's 10, 12?
11.
Of course. So it's more reasonable for the promoter to come up with some sort of way to look after 10, 11 teams. You can't expect Infront to look after 34 teams because Lewis Phillips just decided he wants to start a team, and now Lewis Phillips has realised he can't fund his team. Blame Infront. Like, that's where there's such a grey area between this being a world championship, but then we're going to cry because Lewis Phillips' team can't survive, but then also why should, like, you know, it's... Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you can't put... The creme de la creme are surviving and prospering in MXGP, and ultimately that should be the priority and what we judge Infront on.
Yeah, and there are sugar daddies. I mean, that makes the sport move around. I mean, rich team owners that, you know, have a motocross as a passion. They want to go and do racing. They want to be at the highest level. They want to have the shiniest bikes in the goldfish bowls. You know, that kind of, you know, it's unstable, and it can sort of fluctuate in terms of the paddock looking good or not. And you and I have been on the inside, Lewis, so we know that there's cracks in the system. We know there are failings and there are things that could be done better. But the fact that, you know, big companies like Triumph and Ducati are making or spending millions on developing new engine platforms, even combustion engine ones at that, and looking to go racing inside MXGP says that, you know, people far more intelligent than you and I have done business case studies. They've looked at this series and they've looked at the value of competing and realized that it's worth it. And that has to have something. And that's why MXGP bang on so much about having new manufacturers coming in, because it does show to some degree the success of the job they're doing. And they go to have 2 races in Indonesia, and you think, well, what the hell are they doing there? You know, fans might also be looking at some tracks on the TV thinking, what the fuck is this? But then, you know, that's also part of balancing out a calendar, and that happens in every single championship. In Formula One, you have the fans sort of aghast at so many races, and why are you having 3 events in the Middle East where there's more lights than there are people, it would seem, watching. But, you know, that's how you have to sort of fashion a professional sport these days. Why Manchester City are doing their Premier League and Champions League campaign, but then also flying off to remote parts of the globe to do exhibition matches to appease sponsors and, you know, their commercial interests. You know, MXGP can have 4 or 5, 6 crowning kind of key centerpiece events at great tracks of a lot of history, but they also need to go to some of the events that make some of it pay and bring the budget in. You know, I think you've got to accept that. And
also, and I'm not petitioning for this, but if we had a 20-man MXGP gate and that was it, the optics of the situation would be much more pleasant, because that would portray a healthier sport, because all of those 20 riders would be on an official, well-supported team with 0 whispers of going away or going bust, and the optics of the situation to a fan would be much more pleasant, and they wouldn't prompt questions and thoughts like this. The reason that these ideas are coming up is because motocross is unique in the fact that we have 2 classes of equal importance, 40-man gates, therefore the difference between first and last, the gulf is much greater in every way imaginable, from employment to money to support to recognition, but that's just the makeup of the sport. And I feel for Infront, because they can't change the makeup of the sport because that will cause mass outrage, but also they can't support 40, 80 riders, and then we haven't even started on EMX and WMX. So they're kind of a victim of just what the sport is, and they're trying to toe the line of that. I don't know.
There's so many kind of twos and fros to it, because, you know, the European Championship, I think, doesn't do any favors to Grand Prix in terms of the abuse that the track gets. It means certain circuits are really tight in terms of space and logistics. But then on the other side, it's also bringing revenue towards Infront, and it's making some of those events, which are bigger and harder to make happen from a financial point of view, realistic. So there's always like kind of a compromise in every little way. And yeah, it depends how you just want to take it, I suppose.
I don't want to touch on this for too long, but it has stirred up a lot of comments amongst the uninformed clickbait media that exists. So David Luongo did an interview with Gate Drop this week. Presumably you haven't seen it.
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
but some of the comments come across quite sharp. For instance, Gate Drop asked about 5 teams leaving the paddock, and David replied, "This is a natural evolution. Every year, some teams leave the paddock while others arrive. This helps create stronger teams in the paddock, as teams that cannot stay in the World Championship make way for new ones." I've already seen that start to build quite a lot of, they need to go, get them out. But I understand what he's saying. I don't think it's portrayed maybe in the best way, but also I can offer this context. Having been around and interviewed David a lot, I can tell from this interview that what Gate Drop did is they emailed him questions and David emailed a reply. Because I've done both in person and email, and when you email David questions, you get much shorter, sharper replies. Whereas when you talk to him in person, it's much more fluid and a lot more thoughtful.
Yeah.
So I can tell immediately that this interview's been done in that way, which doesn't do him any favors. So maybe consider that context.
Just going on that point briefly and going back to what I was saying before, I think there should be some sort of regulation in MXGP where factory teams have to have 3 rider lineups. Maybe you can have your A and B rider, and then the C1 is a junior, someone you can pick out of MX2 or someone that you need to develop. Maybe you have to be giving them a minimum of 2 year plus 1 contract. Something, along those lines. And maybe also having a test rider. I mean, I know I'm talking about fantasy figures here when it comes to money, but, I think if you had that established, say 4 or 5 rider teams, 4 or 5 teams or 3 riders apiece, then you're always going to have that kind of guaranteed lineup. If one of them are injured, then the test rider could step in. Being a test rider for a factory team could also become a viable career step for, say, pick a name, Alberto Ferrato at the moment. Maybe he could be a Red Bull KTM test rider for this year, with the inclusion of several, 10 wildcards, for example. That kind of could be an option, and it keeps people inside the game, and also means that the gate, when it's hit by injuries, inevitably can stay reasonably strong.
Yeah, and it adds more layers for us to talk about. It adds some interesting reasons to look at Alberto Ferrato in more detail. And to your point about adding a 3rd rider, I think a lot of riders in the Alberto Ferrato range would ride for factory Yamaha for free just to have that opportunity. Alberto Ferrato has signed for Honda SR Moto Blues Motul for 2025, and from what I know, that contract is sub
Minimal.
40,000 euros.
Yeah, I mean, that's fucking ridiculous. How can you pay a rider less than a mechanic? I think, the priorities of teams there are just way fucked up, and there needs to be some sort of not a watchdog, not a union or something just sort of policing that, really. But then what do you do? I mean, does that team suddenly cannot stop racing because they can't afford to pay a rider, a fair wage? I think also no rider should be riding for free whatsoever. If he can bring a sponsor in and can pay himself 100 and 150 grand, then at least that's something. It
really is just a confusing point where the sport is trying to be super professional, but ultimately it can't do that and sustain a 40-man gate, which is the tradition of motocross. That's ultimately the crux of every issue. I think you can come back to that on all points, from we need better tracks, as in old school tracks, to the paddock situation, the climate of the paddock, all of that. I think that really is the crux of everything.
It does seem to be a bit of a extreme. I mean, the Goldfish Bowls thing, a real stark demonstration of the have and have-nots. I don't know. In one way, it does show a positive thing about the sport, just the same way that I agree, we should be transparent on rider salaries, because, if Tim Geiger is earning nearly 4 million euros for his HRC contract, then that's something that's really positive and shows how much HRC believe in him, how much he works and how much he's earned that. It shows to young riders whose parents are paying everything to go up through the European and youth motocross channels, that if they keep going and they're lucky, then they can maybe get to some sort of stage where financially they can make it work. There's a lot that can change, Lewis, but it just seems so volatile sometimes.
Yeah, for additional context, just to make this very clear to everyone, Jeffrey and Tim are making money essentially equal to their counterparts in the USA. So from that point of view, MXGP is kind of like for like. Prado will make more money at Kawasaki than he's ever done in MXGP, but that's kind of mainly because he had a long-standing contract with Austria that almost didn't allow him to renegotiate the Tim Jeffrey level money that he eventually deserved. So it's not like Jeffrey and Tim are looking at America and going, I mean, some elements they are, yes. The prize money or the bonus money that riders get from teams, $100,000 a win. Yes, Jeffrey and Tim are getting a minor percentage of that. But as far as base salaries, that is comparable. So take that for what you will. What isn't comparable is the quality of Polosport, because it's so far superior to others in the field. Hey, Yamaha YZ125 or 250 riders, this one's for you. If you've been riding models from 2002 to 2021, listen up, because Polosport has something that's going to make your heart race. They're introducing the new restyling kit, a complete transformation for your Yamaha, giving your bike a 2024 look without any complicated modifications. This kit includes everything you need: a new gas tank, a full race seat, and airbox, all designed to fit seamlessly. Your Yamaha deserves it. Polosport has what you need. Thank you to Polosport, All Balls Racing, and EVS. Are we done on that very complicated, sticky point?
Yeah, because there's no sort of easy answer, is there?
No.
I think it's going to be a subject for podcasts going through, and certainly as well, if you do get like 4 or 5 riders jumping out of MXGP, it'll be interesting to analyze their reasons why. You know, the ages that they are, what they've already accomplished. It's it is fascinating.
Something that I found fascinating recently is I was digging through my statistics spreadsheet, and this point jumped out at me. Suzuki has won in MX2 more recently than Kawasaki, which we know that Kawasaki hasn't exactly been flourishing in MX2, and they haven't had a factory team, for instance. F&H has done well, ensured there's been podium representation, but this surprised me. So my point, or my question to you, is what's your immediate reaction to that? Are you like, wow, Suzuki, look at them? Or are you like, Kawasaki need to get it together? Or are you like, wow, Kawasaki probably aren't stoked that fact has just been shared on a podcast?
But when and where have Suzuki posted these results?
Suzuki posted?
No, yeah. I mean, why are you saying the Suzuki have outstripped Kawasaki?
Wait, what? No, have won in MX2 more recently.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of the last time Suzuki have won.
2017 with Seewer. No, 2016, sorry. 2017 with Seewer.
And there's been no significant Kawasaki results since 2017?
The last Kawasaki win was 2016, and the last Suzuki win was 2017.
No way.
See, this was my reaction when I was sat on my laptop, like, oh my.
No, you must be... Jordi Tixier didn't win on a Kawasaki when he was reigning
Jordi
world champion?
Tixier won 2 GPs in his career, and they were in the last 4 rounds of 2014. That fact underlines the sheer right place, right time of his world championship.
Well, I mean, also it highlights the pressure, you know, the absolute anguish of getting results to achieve your ambition. It's 2014 is a good season. I should dip into that again.
Well,
at some point.
That's coming up. But to give you more context, when I did this, which was October the 17th, days since last MX2 win, Husqvarna 18, KTM 123, Yamaha 389, going back to last year, Gas 431, again going back to last year, Honda 2,300 days, going back to Vlaanderen in 2018 Indonesia, and then Suzuki 2,615. So Suzuki are really quite close to Honda there, and Kawasaki 3,007 days. Honestly,
3,000 days.
I when I tell you that I stumbled upon this and then just sat there for like an hour, just my mind was like thinking about all the different points to consider with this and the many ways you could go, like staggering information.
But there must have been some real near misses for Kawasaki. I mean, they had a factory team.
Well, so 2016 was Ferrandis. They had Anstey on Dixon Kawasaki in 2015. 2017, Ferrandis left for America, and they had Petrov, Steri, and Rubini. That was the factory team. Obviously, that team didn't produce wins. So, and then the factory team went away at the end of that year. F&H entered the fold as sort of the Kawasaki, the main Kawasaki MX2 team. They had a lot of podiums. There was that one year Jacoby and Sterry were really like top 5 mainstays. But
wearing the Leat gear, one of the first teams to run the Leat livery. But Steve Dixon as well must have had a few podiums.
Worth noting that Rowan van der Moosdijk did win a moto on a Kawasaki in Lommel in 2020. So and actually Horgmo won a moto on Kawasaki last year in Turkey. So they have had a couple of moto wins here and there. They've had moto wins more recently than Honda. So take that for what you will.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to be on a Kawasaki 250, do you? I mean, that's kind of the runt of the litter, isn't it?
Well, when you actually look at it then, they're re-entering MX2 with a factory bike next year with... I don't know how to pronounce his first name. Mathis or Mattis? Mattis. It's got to be Mattis. It's French.
Yeah.
Valin, EMX 250 champion. That's really boom or bust, because ultimately this is going to be a proof of concept. They want to dispute your claim that you don't want to be on a Kawasaki. And the way for them to do that is in 2025... Valin has to be competitive. If he's not competitive, they've essentially written their own death warrant and supported your claim fully.
Yeah, no pressure then for like an EMX 250 rookie. I mean, the first thing they need to do is sort out the starts. I mean, that's got to be the main Achilles heel for any 250, and one of the reasons why Honda just lagged behind so much. Ruben Fernandez was an incredibly strong rider in MX2, but it was just too big for that bike to pull him along. I'm surprised he didn't win a GP. He was on the podium a few times before he was signed up for the Premier class.
Who was that, sorry?
Ruben Fernandez.
Yeah, to be honest, I published my findings. I sound like a official scientist. I published my findings, and then I did have a sudden, wait, surely Ruben did win in MX2, and I quickly rushed back to recheck because I was certain that I must have missed something, but no. He had the red plate, of course, in 21, was that? Yeah, 21. But no GP win. Fascinating. I love it. I love the fact that you also found it fascinating, because so many times have I brought you information that you've just moved on from.
But the Suzuki thing is the Suzuki thing's fascinating, but it was a dog of a bike, and just a pretty shitty manufacturer anyway. I still harbour some ill feeling for the way that they dealt with the whole MotoGP exit, which was just shocking, poorly handled, could have been better communicated, but then not really that surprising. Amazed that Ken Roxon went back to ride a Suzuki, amazed that he can still make it competitive. I found the whole Kickstart Kenny thing really quite pathetic. Why you're one of the best riders in the world, one of the most talented riders of all time.
A gimmick.
Why you ride in outdated machinery when you should be on the best stuff. The fact that Kawasaki are worse, Lewis, I think that was a good find.
Thank you. I also, upon doing this, I kind of reminded myself, obviously at this point, as you just say, our opinion of Suzuki is not very favourable, kind of not much good to say. And it wasn't until I started putting this together that I realised how good they were in MXGP when they pulled the plug. I, for some reason, had it in my head that they were on a steady decline to the point where they were, and they've gone. They left kind of not on top, but they were still Suzuki. It's not like they were lagging behind the competition. It kind of reinforced what a blow that was when they did exit.
Yeah, and it was all down really to Sylvain Gabors and how slick and well organised that factory team was. I've spoken about it before on this podcast, but he had the kind of relationship with the Japanese whereby when their budget system would run late, he would be able, as Gabors Racing Promotions, to sign, real sort of flagship talent, on the assurances of, the quality of the machinery and the contracts that will come up, even though like Sylvain and Eric sometimes when he was part of the structure and the whole close team that he had there, didn't really have that backing. So it was a real collaboration, I think, between the Japanese and also the Belgian setup. And of course that, just went into a terminal decline when sort of Stefan Everts took over. He had his own philosophy and he wanted to do things differently, but Sylvain kind of very much massaged that relationship with the Japanese. And sometimes it was flying on cloud nine and incredibly efficient, and other times it was a little bit more laboured. And I think Stefan just took the wrong approach on that. I've always sort of wanted to dip into it with him, but I think it's quite a sore point that he couldn't make it work. And ultimately, Suzuki said, right, we're ditching it. And, as it would turn out, it'd be part of a global plan to shelve racing activities. But now for me, Suzuki just seems antiquated, outdated. I don't even like the color. So it's, yeah.
And also to your point, from my understanding, Sylvain does still have communication with people in Suzuki. From what I know, last year he approached
Does he drive a
Suzuki.
Swift? Does he drive a Swift?
Who can forget the Suzuki Swift team or Swift Suzuki, whatever the way round it was? From what I know, last year, Sylvain did call up Suzuki and say, like, I know of X team that would make the perfect route for you to re-enter MXGP. Like, this is it. This is the perfect time for you to bring it on back. They're ready for you. I can help. And Suzuki were like, no. So the fact that Sylvain was in that position, though, from my understanding, says that there's still a connection there. But, yeah. Speaking of connection, you should have a connection with All Balls Racing because they can serve all of your needs. The All Balls Racing Group is a combination of the finest aftermarket power sports brands from across the US and Europe, combining OEM-level engineering and design capabilities with a world-class supply chain makes them the largest global supplier of critical aftermarket hard parts for the power sports industry. You can trust the All Balls Racing Group to provide the exact fitment and best quality in the industry at a price that fits your budget. Do you have to go, or do you have 10 minutes?
No, we're good.
Okay.
I actually want to talk about Jeremy Seewer's Ducati gear.
Okay, go ahead.
I thought it was quite an interesting post. Him decked out in red, wearing a hoodie and then a cap. But then he kind of undermined it a little bit with his following post by putting it on top of what was a camel? Or what sort of animal was it that was wearing the Ducati cap next?
I can't remember. It wasn't a camel, though, was it?
Yeah, it was some sort of obscure animal. Was it like a horse? Or
It was a donkey, wasn't it? He's got donkeys.
Was it?
I don't think it was a camel. He lives in Switzerland.
I just remember looking at this sort of humongous hairy thing and thinking, well, why have you put a Ducati cap on it? Is that symbolic? What are you trying to tell us?
No, I think it was a donkey. I think it was his donkey.
It's even worse.
He has
they race camels. Camels are fast.
Are they?
Yeah.
Of all the gripes for you to have been sat on waiting for this podcast, is that Jeremy put a hat on a camel.
they race camels. They're quick, but putting on a donkey, I don't know. Was that the right message? It was funny. Props to you for your humour, but I'm not too sure if Mr. Ducati likes seeing his hat on a donkey.
Honestly, seeing the photo of Jeremy in Ducati colours, I was a bit like, cool, that is cool. Like, it is really quite special to have Ducati involved with a rider like Seewer. Because although Caroli is such a giant, because he's retired, it's harder to associate that with top-level competition at this point, because it could just be an ambassador deal, or, it is.
Yeah.
But when you see Jeremy Seewer still competitive, still going for wins in Ducati colours, it really reinforces the situation that we're in, which is Ducati are coming for KTM's success.
I think we have to have very, very low expectations for Ducati in 2025.
But it's Seewer.
Jeremy's quick, we know that, and he's fast, and he's going to work to make that bike decent. But I think if he's getting top 5 results, then that's a win in their first year, in my humble opinion.
Okay, let me put this to you then. Jeremy has many top 5s, but doesn't stand on a podium once in 2025, which would be the first time that he's done that ever. Good or bad?
Good. Really good. Brand new motorcycle like that. I think, I think there's going to be a lot of teething problems, racing in sort of intense heat of Indonesia, through some of the shitty, boggy conditions we're also going to find. I remember some of the rain in 2024. Unbelievable scenes. I think it's going to be a big technical test, and they're developing a bike as well as racing it. And that's sort of the challenge that Jeremy's taken on. So if he gets a podium, I think they should celebrate that like a GP win. And, top fives would be, pretty decent results. It'd be very cool to see. And I think there will be deservedly a lot of fuss around the motorcycle. And then Triumph are launching their 450, aren't they?
This
their
week.
Production bike. Yeah. So, you'd think they will be potentially racing it towards the end of 2025 at some point?
My understanding is that it will be raced in a lot of national championships. The British Championship, for instance, that will be announced tomorrow. Yep. I got told not to tell you, so I'm not going to tell you. Well, not you, but the people. Alvin Oostland is racing a Triumph 450 in the Swedish Championship. But my understanding is that because it's national championship, they will be very stock-based bikes. So they do not want them competing in MXGP next year, even as a wild card, is what I kind of took from it. But maybe I'm off a little bit, but that's the gist.
I would like somebody to explain why, there's more investment made in the 250, which has to be higher tuned and more race fettled, you could say, to be competitive, than to take a 450, which can have a very strong production base. We get riders going into MXGP with like a pipe and some fancy suspension and a couple of other tweaks, and they're able to do a half decent job. So why not go 450 racing first?
Was it maybe a statement of intent?
Yeah, it's just maybe just a marketing thing. There's going to be less spotlight, I guess, on maybe MX2 compared to MXGP.
Or
in MXGP, if the TV pictures are showing Geiger, Hurlings and Prado all the time, then you're not really going to be seeing a Triumph 450. Whereas if you're spending a fortune on a 250 and tuning it better when you're essentially in a class that's dominated by only Austrian bikes, there's more chance of it being up there, and there was in 2024.
More chance to get a talent in MX2 that can do some damage than there is in MXGP. And also, I understand or believe that 250s outsell 450s in the world. So maybe it was just this bike will sell better than the 450, so we'll do this first.
But then, sorry to cut across you, but the philosophy as well from some manufacturers is that, it doesn't matter if it's a 250 or 450, it's just the success and the visibility. That's really enforcing, people see a blue bike, they know it's a Yamaha winning, so it doesn't really matter so much. And I guess it's, is there more visibility in MXGP than there is in MX2? I mean, just going on our podcast, Lewis, how often do we talk about 450s compared to MX2? I mean, we might talk for an hour and 45 minutes will be on, the Premier class. And then, by the way, here's MX2.
Yeah, I really would like to see them reinforce that structure in MXGP's position as MXGP. Too much blurred lines. MXGP should be talked about twice as much as MX2. Couple of quick questions. Philip Dejong, does MXGP improve if a big media company like Liberty Media would take over? I mean, yes, naturally, Liberty Media have a lot more resources and funding and ability than any other motorsport promoter in the world at the moment. So that's no knock on Infront. You're just comparing number one to not number one.
Yeah, it's just a huge different entity. But it is, what kind of competitors are there, for Infront Moto Racing, for doing motocross? And again, I think we have to give props for the job that they do. If somebody new came in, I think the championship would be far more chaotic for a period of years. Even if there were some radical shake-ups in some ways, it might be a version of motocross or Grand Prix motocross that a lot of people don't like.
I think my overarching theme would be, it just needs to be refined. It doesn't need drastic changes. There are just small little tweaks here and there that would make MXGP better. It's not like we want Infront or someone new to come in and just demolish 50% of what goes on. It is, for the most part, fine. There are just a couple of things that could be made better, but it's not terrible by any means. Stop with this. It might sound on this podcast like we've defended Infront, but realistically, the tone of the questions, it is not that diabolical. It really isn't. So I think I speak for you as well when I say we can't get on board with that.
Well, I mean, also people who are asking the questions, send comments. What is it you don't like about MXGP? I mean, is it just the fact that the tracks are not good enough? what's the issue with it?
Yeah, what do you see, or what do you think you see? And like, maybe make your questions more specific, like, and then we can either be like, yeah, that is true, but, or maybe that is true and you're completely right.
Because also, I mean, we're here offering our opinions on a podcast, but to be fair and just, you have to be a little bit impartial, and you have to sort of say, well, I don't like this about the championship, but actually I do quite like this. Because when you're working so closely in something, you do see positive and negatives, and you see how riders or teams or people who are putting their money and their budgets into the sport perceive it. And it would be unfair if we said, well, this is shit, and shit, and we completely ignored actually the positive things that people like, such as manufacturers using it for a development tool, or for companies like Fox, really wanting to show off how cool and edgy the sport is for their athletes, because you would not be able to see the likes of what Tim Geiger is able to do without that MXGP platform. It's not like the whole thing could shut up shop and then everybody moves to the US. I mean, yeah, well, like we said, if it suddenly evaporated tomorrow, I mean, one question was, what happens in 10 years? Will it still be there or something? It's a championship that's been going for decades, and it probably will go on for decades.
Yeah, I think that where I've ended up on this is what angers me, and I kind of said it before, is the fact that you can be talking to a team in the furthest corner of a paddock that's working out of an easy up, and that team manager is going, oh, it's just impossible to be in this paddock, and that sparks outrage, and we want to all support that guy, when realistically, I'm kind of starting to lean on the side of, well, this isn't really for you.
Yeah.
We're not here for you. Like, you and your rider that you want to help get 22nd, like, fair play, but at the end of the day, that's not what we're here for. So,
yeah, that's not Grand Prix anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, feel privileged that you're even in the paddock.
Yeah, I say that because, the Grand Prix racing wasn't always that way, and it, even up to not so long ago. But that's the way it is now, and, you have to make things more exclusive to appear more exclusive and more attractive.
A couple of people like JDog625 and Squall06 want Harrop updates. No contract is signed, but he will be in America next year. Maybe not a forever home. High chance that he could be back in MXGP in 26. But I am 99% certain that he will be in America in some shape or form in 2025. Just waiting to find out where he's going to end up. There was another question. Let's end on these two questions, actually. A couple of British-based questions. Mark Davis wants to know, will Ben Watson be in MXGP next year? And I can tell you with confidence that yes, he will be. And his deal will be announced this weekend, so stay tuned. Will you be available this weekend, Adam, for an emergency reaction podcast?
This is one of my only weekends off in a long time.
Okay, so you don't want to react.
To spend it far away from any motorcycle. But okay. I'll be watching your Twitter feed just to see, what Ben's plans are.
Okay, you know though, right? Yeah, I told you.
Yes.
You know. Okay. Are you excited?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, good, because I need to trying to raise the roof
Ben's got to be on the comeback trail. We need to see something after that injury.
It was honestly in my little statistical findings. Ben was really good before his injury, really good, like really good. And then I also wanted to talk about Chris United 93. He's re-signed with Dave Thorpe, but was Muse in any talks with full-time GP teams? I heard a rumor that he was talking to Jackie Martins, but apparently there was not much of a foundation there. So no, I don't believe so.
That would have been a reunion. I mean, Conrad was with Jackie when he sort of made his breakthrough. I remember was it 2 wins or like a really fantastic EMX 250 performance when Jackie's team were running Husqvarnas at Valkenswaard, from whereupon Conrad was then elevated into MX2. I can't remember who was injured at the time, but he kind of took over that bike. But then his career, I think it was a wrong place, wrong time for him. And I'd like to see him get another go, but the thing is, because Conrad has the talent to do it, but he's just sort of fallen into that void of being one of those British riders that can seem so good on English or British soil, but then crossing the water and making it happen consistently on the international stage has proved a step too far.
Let's end on this question, actually. I don't know how to pronounce his name, so bear with me. Exnon Piggott? Exnon? Sorry, I'm really sorry.
Try.
Although highly doubtful, if LC96, that being Lucas Coenen, wins the MXGP Championship, he isn't eligible for 250s in the USA. So what do you think his plans would be if he won the title next year? His plan, it's fine, his plans. The reason I wanted to talk about this is I'm slowly, but there's time, I'm slowly building excitement and expectation for Lucas Coenen in MXGP next year. Don't call me crazy, but based on the information that we were discussing last week, could he win the championship? I'm open to that conversation.
Lewis, you're crazy.
Based on the conversation that we had last week,
Yes.
Prado's gone to America.
Yeah. There's a small sort of athlete combination called Tim Geiger and Honda.
But we're one step closer.
It would have to be a really freaky 2015 sort of season of injury where Lucas suddenly finds himself in a Roman Febvre situation where results are coming and momentum is building, confidence is way up there, and he's able to seize the championship. I think that's the only way it would happen. I expect the full-on rookie experience for Lucas, in that he's going to work out that he needs to be fitter and stronger, and taking on the big boys, as Jeffrey Hurlings likes to call them, is going to be no mean feat.
Okay, well, first of all, the dad needs to calm down if he's going to win the championship. So that's step one. And step two would be, I think for come Argentina, Lucas either goes 1-1 or like DNF 16. I do not believe that come Argentina, there is a 5-5 steady day anonymous performance in him. It's either incredible or not.
No, top 10s. Assuming that, the gate is pretty full and nobody's injured and there's been no issues, which is already a big ask for the first round. I mean, Ruben Fernandez won in Argentina in 2023, so you could have one of those first round freak things happening. But I think, Lucas just needs to keep his head about him. Still so young. Learn the 450. Don't be pulled, from pillar to post by it. And, it has been announced. Yeah, he's definitely doing MXGP.
Yeah.
We don't know about the rest of the Red Bull KTM lineup yet, but
no, it's just Rossi who hasn't been actually, and Nastan's second rider.
Yeah, Marc-Antoine Rossi. So, but yes, it's going to be an interesting season. I'm glad he's doing it. I think he's slightly mad because he could have been easily MX2 world champion next year. But being on the 450 is going to be something of the wild card, But there's, Prado's gone, but there are still some protagonists that we didn't see much of in 2024. 2 from Yamaha at least. So, you've got those factors to come in.
Okay. To reinforce or underline my stance on this, one, I'm planting the Lucas Coenen flag in the moon. I don't know. In some sort of MXGP pie. I'm planting that.
You're getting... Simon Lagenfelder is writing a message as we speak now, listening to this.
To me or to Lucas?
Saying to you, saying, do not curse him.
I was thinking he might be messaging Lucas saying, don't get too excited. He'll be making absurd Pixar references that are detrimental to you shortly. Okay, and to your point about Yamaha, I will go on record now. Lucas Coenen outperforms Maxime Renault and Jargo Gertz in 2025.
No. Maxime Renault is going to be a championship contender.
No, I'm so excited. I don't know. I've never spoken to anyone in the Coenen family in my life, and I have no information to back up this campaign I'm on. But I'm a bit excited.
He's a talented rider. He's got the right body shape. The maturity is coming, and he was awesome. He was the best rider in MX2 in the latter part of the season, Lewis. So I think your optimism is well founded. It's not a super crazy take, but to say he's going to be outperforming Maxime Renault is somewhat far fetched. When we come to doing our sort of outlook for 2025, our preseason preview, or whatever, we should take. We should have like our championship prediction and then like our most outlandish kind of bet, because there are a couple of contenders there.
Yes, there are. There are indeed. And based on your comment about Lucas crashing a lot, maybe he should invest in some EVS protection. Experience the pinnacle of knee protection and injury prevention with the new EVS Web Eclipse knee brace. For over 39 years, EVS has relentlessly honed their engineering expertise, consistently delivering award-winning knee protection. This legacy of excellence is embedded in every facet of the new Web Eclipse, which represents the culmination of their tireless dedication to innovation and rider safety. Once again, thank you to Polysport, All Balls Racing, and EVS Sports. Let's end on this. The next podcast, because there will be another one this side of Christmas, right? Please?
Yeah.
Okay. We can, A, get Ben on to discuss his new contract. I know you want to answer yes immediately, but let's hear the other options. 2, we could get JT on to discuss Fly's big push into MXGP with a very prominent rider team deal for 2025, and maybe the mechanics of doing a deal in MXGP versus America, and I think that would be an interesting perspective on the state of the paddock and the state of the series. Or C, we can do, after over a year of me saying that we will do this and us never doing it, we can do a random year in review podcast.
Or we could call our friend Rasmus Jorgensen and ask him how Kai de Wolf has been doing in Supercross and see if he'll spill the beans.
Okay, I spoke to Rasmus. Actually, no. I spoke to someone close to the situation. Not going to tell you who. Kai has impressed everyone. He's riding very, very well. And I think the tone or the feeling I get is it's gone about as well as anyone expected, if not better than that.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
But so there's been some miscommunication or some, I don't know. So Kai's contract with Austria is until 2027, not the end of 2025. So he's not going to America in 2026 unless he can somehow work it with the peer mobility group in some way. So these rumours about Pro Circuit Kawasaki in 2026, categorically false. So take that for what you will.
Well, he won't be the first rider to buy his way out of a contract as well.
Okay, that's also true and fair. So maybe just disregard what I just said. I don't know. But back to A, B, or C. C.
Choose
C.
Well, C would be the easiest one, but we have to make sure we pick the right year.
Well,
but then, Lewis, you've been very slack in getting interview guests on the podcast, I think.
But we had this discussion about, is it like it takes up half the podcast? It really eats away at just the general discussion. Honestly, maybe the biggest 50-50 internal conflict in my life is deciding if this podcast is better with riders or without, because I can see both sides.
But the thing is, if you get someone and you just do an interview, I agree. Whereas if you actually kind of involve them in some discussion points, then that's where it could be interesting. That's where we could sort of, involve someone like Ben.
Oh, well, okay.
That's option A.
We do a year in review and we get a rider from said year.
Yeah, that might need more than one podcast though. Imagine if you got Tommy Searle in to break down 2012.
Oh, let's do that. What a podcast. What I was thinking though, I love that idea, so I think I'm throwing out my idea, is if we say that the next podcast is going to be a year in review, right now you pick a year, I pick a year, and we do a Twitter poll and the fans pick which of our years we discuss.
Okay, yeah.
Quite interactive.
Well, that means we can do all three. Why not before Christmas? How big is the Vital MX budget?
Yeah, we can do as many. I've confirmed that I said that we would be doing this podcast bi-weekly in the off season, so we're good.
Right. Okay. Well, there we go. I mean, we can do all three, and I think the Fly Racing one is good because they're actually making a big gesture towards MXGP. So, and also JT is well up on his MXGP knowledge. I think he does a great job with Paul Malin on the commentating. And I sent him a message in Kozar as well. The last Grand Prix, I thought that was he only added to the TV production. So it'd be good to talk to him as well. So there you've got three. You got the rider, you've got the industry, and you've got the nostalgia. So I think we should do all three, Lewis.
Okay. So, but for my Twitter poll, pick a year that you want to rehash.
Well, I have to give a year off the top of my head.
If you want. We can say a year now and then you can think about it, but just for entertainment purposes.
I don't know why, but 2008 just comes to mind.
I was thinking that. Okay.
Josh Coppins, it should have been Josh Coppins' championship, but it wasn't. It ended up being David Philipparts's, and milestones in many ways. Came down to a bit of a scratchy final Grand Prix. Big title for Yamaha, was Monster Energy's first in Europe. Lots of little talking points.
MX2 was a big KTM ding dong.
Absolutely. Tommy Searle, Tyler Rattray, Tony Cairoli's injury, the first big one of his career. It was post Christophe Pourcel as well. So, yeah, there's a few things.
Okay. Now I kind of don't want to pick a year because I'm struggling.
Where was the Nations in 08?
Donington.
Yes. Okay.
I was on Eurosport.
You were on Eurosport.
They zoomed in on the fans and they zoomed in on me.
I was impressed for a minute. I thought that you might have been doing some sort of interviewing.
But, no. I will go.
08 also had the first big Monster Energy party in the Motocross of the Nations, which I probably already mentioned. And it was, if I'm not mistaken, Tony Cairoli's 450 debut as a wild card, where he won.
No, that was 07. The GP.
Was it 07?
The GP at Donington in 07, yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, because what was the reason that I've thought about this recently?
I think it was 08, because Philipparts was already world champion.
Because when I was doing my statistics about manufacturers, KTM only won one GP in 2007. And I was like, that's weird, and looked into it, and it was Tommy won the one GP that Cairoli moved up to the 450 class for. Donington.
There we go, yeah.
Okay. I will go 2000, and I like 2008 because I feel like that part of MXGP history is really overlooked, because I feel like everyone jumps from Everts to Cairoli. But I will go 2005 because it's a season that I have always talked up. A big investment from Lewis as a child. It was a year before Everts' final year, but I remember there being rumours about Everts maybe negotiating with Suzuki for his final year, so I'd like to get more information on that from you. Townley moved to MXGP, or MX1, as it was called at the time. Battled it out with Coppins. Coppins was making a late run for the title around the middle, and I felt like it was really heating up, but maybe it actually wasn't. Maybe I was young and dumb. Cairoli's first world title in MX2, bit messy. From memory. I'll say 2005. So there we go. Look out for the Twitter poll. I feel like we're relying a lot on our audience here, because I imagine a lot of people are like, I only started following MXGP in 2021.
But also I think 2005 was when Ben became the first rider to win in MX1 and MX2. The two categories.
Yeah, true, yeah.
To do so. David Philipparts, I think, did it in 06 when he moved up.
And Townley would have been KTM's first MX1 win?
No, that was Steve Ramon in the very first MX1 GP in Zolder.
I thought, that was two. Yeah, Malott won 2004 round one, didn't he?
Trying to think now. I think Ramon won the first moto.
I definitely remember that. I think Malott won the overall with a 2-1.
Yeah.
Hold on. We're out in the weeds, but Zolder 2004 MX1 results. Because for whatever reason, these actually aren't on the MXGP website. If you go to 2004, well, the last time I checked,
I think 2004, because that's when Infront Moto Racing, then Ustream, retook control of the series.
But,
you won't be able to find any results from 2003.
No, but on 2004, it starts from the second round in Spain. Round one just isn't on there. Yeah.
That's bizarre.
Let's see here.
Kenneth Gunderson. I don't know if he took a Premier Class win for KTM. He did for Kawasaki, I think. That would have been 250s.
Honestly.
Oh, goodness. Poor podcasting this.
Oh, here we go. I think I've got it finally. MX2 over. Okay, it's listed as the MX2 overall, but Malott, Ramon, Coppins.
Right, okay.
Everts, Pichon, Gunderson. But also, I've just come up with a business idea before we go. I just Googled 2004 MX1 Zolder results. you would think that Google just has no idea what I'm talking about, which essentially it didn't. I feel like if we create a website that's really like savvy, but kind of just is like, we just backlog it with like you've got all of your old race reports.
Like a time capsule, you mean?
Well, like, yeah, and then it would come up on Google. Yeah. It would come up on Google, like when people like me just Google random stuff.
We would have to team up with Pascal Decoeur, who is very much the ultimate sage, the doyen of motocross journalism, because he has a personal archive stretching all the way back to the 70s. So if you say to him, Pascal, when was the last Hungarian to win a Grand Prix? He'll be able to flick through and tell you. I mean, I've used him as a resource sort of many times, bless him. He's always been so patient. But, he's the ultimate stats man. And hopefully before he retires, he manages to get some business acumen and sell that archive, because it's fascinating.
Yeah, mine only goes back to Infront's introduction in 2004, because, as you say, the results just don't exist unless you were there to get the papers, I guess.
I first interviewed Pit Byer in 2001 at the Belgian Grand Prix, which was built on a makeshift track just by the La Source hairpin at Spa-Francorchamps.
What?
And I was talking to Pit. Just by the start gate. We just did a quick interview for MotoGrandPrix.com, and I recently kind of pulled that back up. I was writing about it in my MotoGP book, because obviously Pit went on to become this huge big important figure for KTM and motorsport. And I was trying to find his results. I was like, that was round 5 or 6 of the 2001 250cc World Championship. And it was notable, that Grand Prix, because that's when Chad Reed finished on the podium for the first time. And I was trying to think, I was trying to research where Byra was in the championship at that point. I think in pre-season he'd broken his arm, and he finished 5th or 7th or something like that year. I mean, it was only the year before, I think, where he'd won both motors at the Motocross of the Nations. So it was really complicated, Lewis, trying to find sort of the right results. I was actually having to go into my old news stories archives and try and find references to, bizarre, obscure results that I managed to pull from.
I at first, when you said there was a MXGP at the Spa F1 track, I was shocked. But then I realised that I know that because in 2001, MXGP had an official game which was called MX Rider, which is really random because I don't know why they had a game in 2001. And I played.
It was launched at Sweden.
I played the shit out of that game, and then now I can remember the track from that game, and that's the only reference point I have.
It was the best track of the year, and I really wish I'm doing a terrible disservice to the person who designed it. I want to say his name is Mark Peters. I think I'm probably completely wrong, but he was brought in and recommended by a couple of Grand Prix riders at the time, and did a great job. I mean, it was a shame. I think the event was partially organised by Georges Jobet. And it was in terms of a track, it was one of the best of the season. So it's a shame it didn't happen. Great location.
Yeah, who would have thought? I see, that's a little tidbit that most people wouldn't have known. That's what we're here for. I did ask on Twitter for questions, no matter how random they are. Someone, I better get their name quickly. PH Designs Co. said, "What is Claudio Federici up to these days?" And that may just be too random. So when I said
absolutely no idea.
Yep. When I said random as you want, there's a limit, people. There's a limit. But
then Claudio's career is also pretty good. I think he won his only Grand Prix in that 2001 season in Switzerland, Roggenburg, which was the last time the World Championship went to that track. Probably most famous now for the horrific Josh Coppins crash that can be seen on YouTube, and which is routinely asked about. But Roggenburg was the definition of old school motocross, and Federici was awesome that day on the 250cc Yamaha. And he was very much a favourite of Claudio De Carli, who of course became the mentor to Tony Cairoli. And Federici was actually one of the best early teammates to Cairoli, and really helped him establish his work ethic, helped him establish his base and his lifestyle in Belgium, which was pretty tricky for like a skinny kid from Sicily. So Federici actually had an important part to play in the recent history of MXGP by partially moulding one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, the 2005 season, he was Cairoli's teammate. So it all ties together. Some way, somehow, it all comes back around. Thank you to Polosport All Balls Racing, and EVS for their continued support of this podcast. Thank you to you people for listening. A thoroughly enjoyable episode. Agreed?
Yeah.
We really went down some nice lanes and also squashed some inaccurate accusations towards Infront. So I'm sure that our check will be in the mail. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will be back in the not too distant future, probably after the MotoGP finale, I would imagine, in some shape or form, with this year in review, maybe with Ben Watson, maybe with Tommy Searle, maybe, who knows? A lot of options. But we will see you real soon. Thank you for listening.